Hey there, Dirk here from Dirk's Dystopia today. We're going to talk about some modeling with green stuff or two-part epoxy clay. Generally Milliput is the brand name, unless you buy Games Workshop's branded one. Takes two types of clay, you mix them together, after a couple hours they harden. We're going to talk about tools that I like to use to do this, and then I'm actually going to work on adding some scales to some of my salamanders, 30K army. On the Leviathan Dreadnought, he needs a little bit extra stuff on there. So come back in just a second. We're going to talk about the tools that I use and tips and tricks on how to do this, and then I'll actually start putting some scales on as an example. Thanks. All right, we're back. I have some stuff here laid out. We'll just talk about them individually and we'll start using them. So when I first started doing this a while back, working with this green stuff, gray stuff, I didn't have any special tools. I had your standard hobby knife, nothing special, sharp blade, handle, and that's all I used. And that's probably what I use most still. I have gotten a few more types of tools, but I just got used to using this and it works really well. So there's that as a good tool. And then there's some specialized stuff, kind of almost looks like dental stuff. I think I did buy these on Amazon for working with putty or clay. They're nice. They have different ends. This one's kind of nice because it has an end for pushing down your little scales or whatever you're working with. But these, flat blades are great for cutting the stuff or smoothing it out, things like that. There are some bigger ones. Clay working tools. The ends are pretty rubbery. They're still pretty hard, but they are a little bit softer than the metal. I haven't ever actually used this. Like I said, I bought some, but I'd already been using the knife for a while, so I just kept using it. So those are the tools. Another main thing big thing you're going to need is water. It helps if you keep the tool that you're using wet, then it won't stick to the putty when you're trying to put it in place or stretch it out or whatever. So make sure you have a nice cup of clean water nearby to do this. Okay, when we come back, I will actually start modeling some scales. Actually, I'll start by showing you what I have done, and then we'll add scales to the Leviathan Dreadnought. Talk to you in a second. All right, we're back. I will show you what I've done before. This is a Forge World. It's an exclusive model I picked up at, I believe, one of the stores they did. It's the Cataphractii Praetor. He's got a Thunder Hammer and a Volkite, Combi Volkite. But I wanted to give him the Mantle of the Elder Drake, which is a Salamander special item. Makes him Eternal Warrior. So I modeled this on here, basically just the big piece of the green stuff, and then I put in individual scales across the whole thing. Use something pointier to. So yeah, all of this is individual scales put on. That's what I'm going to work on today. Show you what I've done. So I did that on him, and then I also, slightly different fashion on my Contemptor Dreadnought. I put scales on the shoulder pad, and he's also got scales on the lower leg. So instead of putting like a skin or hide on and then putting scales on the hide, I just modeled it directly onto the leg. I really like the effect, the way it looks. So that's actually what I'm going to do. I feel like my Leviathan is not quite flashy enough. It's a little boring. I do have some decals on him, but I want to add some other stuff. So I think I am going to follow the same pattern. I'm going to put some scales down here on this panel, armor panel on his leg, and then also probably up here on his upper shoulder. We'll see. It gets kind of tight in here. Luckily I magnetized the storm cannon so that can just come off and get out of the way, but we're going to start with that. All right, I'm going to come back. I'm going to show you mixing putty, and we'll get started on the actual modeling. Okay, here we are. So I'm using Milliput. I think I got this at Menards, Home Depot, Lowe's, whatever your home improvement store. Actually, no, I lied. I got this at Hobby Lobby. So Hobby Lobby carries this as well. I believe your home improvement stores will carry some sort of two-part putty, epoxy putty, but it works great. I have used the Games Workshop branded stuff before. It also works great. It's a little bit smaller amount. These used to be full tubes This box basically was full, but I've just used quite a bit in modeling stuff. But you know, I think I paid $7 for all of this, and there's quite a bit left here. So 2 parts, 2 different bags. Just because I didn't want to film myself accidentally cutting myself or something else, I've already cut the 2 pieces I'm going to use. So you just really just start smashing them together really well. You want it to come out into an even color. It tends to be a little bit yellow-ish, gray sometimes. It depends. You can play games with how much of each half of the putty you put in, and that will change some of the consistency and how fast it will dry. I believe I've heard it will change how hard it will dry too. It's supposed to dry pretty rock hard after 3 or 4 hours, but I've heard you can go softer, and you know, it stays more pliable over time if you have a use for something like that. So really, I'm just smashing this back and forth. The yellow stuff's kind of greasy and it's going to stick to your fingers quite a bit until the mixture gets hardened up. But really, you do want it to be pretty smoothly mixed in. You don't want, you know, sections or chunks of one part and the other part not mixed together. That's going to kind of ruin the whole effect you're going for, which is for it to harden at some point. So I think this is pretty solidly mixed up. I don't see any other chunks in there anywhere. So what I'm going to do for the scales, I'm going to start by, I'm just flattening it out. You probably remember doing this with Play-Doh as a kid, but you're going to try and round out, get it going into a nice tube or something like that, like so. Once you get it closer, I'll move my blade so I don't actually stab myself. Get it on the flat surface and just kind of roll it out. You're not looking for the scales that I'm making today, you're not looking to make it perfectly even all the way across. You want, I like some variation in the scale. I don't want it to be uniform all the way across. It's what nature should be, you know, slightly different sizes and shapes. So that's what I'm going for here. So I have this longer tube. Depending on how big of a scale you're going, you may want to make it thicker. You might want to not push it out quite so far. But I got a fairly small area I'm trying to cover, so I don't want, you know, 2 or 3 giant scales. I want quite a few smaller scales, so I'm trying to get it pretty small. I have probably more putty than I need here. That's kind of a common theme for me. I always mix up way more than I need, but I think that is okay. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the knife. I'm just going to chop off the end, so I'm starting with a relatively flat end, and then I'm going to take I'm going to wet my blade so it doesn't stick, and then I'm going to slice off a nice thin chunk. Okay, so I have this thin chunk. It's not really round, but I think I can make it work. We're gonna find out. So here we are. I'm gonna start down at the bottom, and I'm just gonna stick this on here, flatten it out pretty good. I might have got too much water, so you got to play around with the water. You want the tool wet, but you don't want the piece wet. The actual clay, you don't want that wet, and you do want to go thin with this. So I'm going to slice and then go ahead and try and stick it on again. And part of this is going to be trial and error. I'm not an expert at it for sure. Modeling clay or anything has never been my thing, but there, I got it stuck on there. I don't know if you can see that very well, but it's on. And then I just kind of use the blade to roughen up the edge. You don't want perfect circle. Again, it's a scale. It's not going to be perfectly uniform. And then sometimes I'll even, I have a small piece on my thumb here. I'll work it out. Then I'll squish this down if I need some smaller stuff. And then I can just start chopping this apart and use that to fill in areas as well. So I'm going to take this little tiny piece here, and I'm going to try and fill in this little corner down here. Okay, and it sticks. You use the blade to kind of flatten it out a little bit. There we go. So we've got 2 scales on there. You can see this could take a little while, but the effect is really stunning in my opinion. It's a very nice look across the whole thing. So I am going to continue putting scales on. I'll come back in a little bit when I'm further along. I think you really want to watch me put 100 scales on this guy's leg. Maybe you do. Leave a comment. Let me know. Hey, I really like the way you stick scales on this robot. So talk to you in a bit. All right, as you can see, we made some progress. We've almost finished up. Thought I'd just do the last little bit here and see if I can keep my mindless chatter down so I don't say anything too stupid. Just again, cutting off little chunks, rolling it into a ball between my fingertips, and then I try and use a finger to press it into place, and then the blade to kind of flatten it out and give it texture. They're scales, so obviously they're not perfectly flat and smooth. They're all different shaped, in my opinion. They're all different shaped, and they should have some texture on them, some kind of pattern. So that's what I do. I just flatten it on there, smooth it out. Sometimes it sticks. Probably means I need to get a little more water on the blade. Again, you don't want a ton of water on the X-Acto blade, just a little bit. If you get too much, then the whole thing's going to be wet and it won't stick to your model, which is going to cause problems. So you want just enough water so it won't stick to the blade, but not so much that it will not stick to whatever you're trying to put it on. So just flattening them on there little by little. It does take a little while. It goes faster as I've worked on it. I definitely can move a little bit faster. The first couple I did were definitely very tedious. It took quite a while. I was watching TV while I did it, I think, because I just needed to distract myself every once in a while. And this has only probably taken me start to finish 15 minutes or so. Not too bad. Just like anything, the more you do it, the better you get at it. It definitely helps to slow down at the beginning and kind of get the hang of it, though. Just a few more on here and this guy will be complete on his leg. And then I'm trying to decide if I want it on his shoulder or not, but that's not really here or there. If you have any questions on what I'm doing here or how the best way to do it, if you're having problems, feel free to contact me. I'm happy to answer some questions about it. I'm not saying this is the best way and you have to do it this way if you're doing it right, but I have found after some trial and error that this does seem to work the best for me. So this is what I've kind of adopted as my go-to method for scales. I have done a little bit of fur, that more involved just putting a large piece of putty on the model, flattening it out, and then using again the blade with some water on it to keep it from sticking, but using the blade to just kind of draw fur lines into the clay. It worked pretty well, I thought. I did it on a cloak, and I think that's about it. Cloak model I did a few years ago. So there are lots of uses for this. A good friend of mine, Jake at Chief Live Gaming, does some really good Nurgle effects with this stuff, this putty, because it can look like rotting whatever goo, Nurgly stuff. But yeah, imagination is the limit here, and a little bit of patience, and you can really make some cool effects. You know, the nice thing to remember is that it's putty, clay. You have quite a bit of time to work with it before it hardens, so don't panic, don't rush. 2 to 3 hours, give you plenty of time. Try not to do what I do and mix up way too much putty at a time, although it's not super expensive. You still don't need to waste it, I suppose. Probably get better at that. But so I'm gonna call that done. That's his leg all scaled up. That's about as far as I'm gonna go on there. I think I might actually put some on that shoulder. He just needs to look a little bit flashier, I think. He just looked a little dull, in my opinion. I got a few more decals to put on him too. So that is my scale tutorial. I hope it helps. Again, feel free to contact me, leave a comment, and let me know questions, thoughts. If you think you have a way better way I should try, let me know that too. I'm always open to learning more. Thanks for watching. I appreciate it.